In 20 years of covering professional baseball, nobody has ever seen anything like this. Not the journalists, not the analysts, not the former players who have witnessed every kind of drama this sport has to offer. What happened outside Shohei Ohtani's private residence in the hours following Munetaka Murakami's suspension sent shockwaves through the entire baseball world. From the streets of Los Angeles all the way back to Japan, a grown man, a professional athlete, a player once celebrated as the greatest power hitter in Japanese baseball history, on his knees, on a public street, in front of Shohei Ohtani's house, begging. And what Ohtani said in response changed everything forever. Today, we are going to tell you the full story, every detail, every moment, and the shocking decision that Murakami made afterward that nobody, absolutely nobody, saw coming. To truly understand the weight of what happened outside Ohtani's house that night, you need to understand who Munetaka Murakami is, or rather, who he was before everything fell apart. Murakami arrived on the baseball scene like a force of nature. From the moment he stepped onto a professional field in Japan, it was clear that this was someone different, someone special. His swing was unlike anything Japanese baseball had produced in a generation, powerful, explosive, and perfectly natural in a way that cannot be taught or manufactured. He hit home runs the way ordinary players hit singles, effortlessly, repeatedly, with a casual confidence that made opposing pitchers feel helpless before he even stepped into the batter's box. At his peak, Murakami was untouchable. He broke records that had stood for decades. He carried entire teams on his shoulders during playoff runs. He was named to every all-star roster worth mentioning, won every individual award available to him, and became the face of Japanese baseball at a moment when the sport was experiencing a global surge of interest and excitement. Children across Japan wore his jersey. His name was spoken with the kind of reverence usually reserved for legends who had already retired. And then came the call to represent Japan on the world stage. When Murakami joined Samurai Japan for the World Baseball Classic, expectations were sky-high. Here was his chance to show the world what Japanese baseball was truly capable of. Here was his opportunity to stand alongside Shohei Ohtani, the greatest baseball player on the planet, and prove that Japan's national team was the most dangerous lineup in the world. But something went wrong. Badly, terribly, and publicly wrong. The warning signs were there for anyone willing to look closely enough. Murakami's performance in the tournament was deeply inconsistent. The explosive, unstoppable swing that had made him a legend in Japan looked hesitant and uncertain against international pitching. At-bats that should have resulted in towering home runs ended instead in weak ground balls and frustrated strikeouts. The confidence that had always defined him, that unshakable belief in his own ability that radiated from him every time he walked to the plate, appeared to be crumbling in real time. Inside the Samurai Japan camp, concerns were growing. Coaches spoke to him privately. Teammates tried to support him. Every possible resource was made available to help him rediscover the form that had made him a national icon. But Murakami's struggles went deeper than mechanics or timing. Something was off mentally. Something was broken in a way that batting practice and video sessions could not fix. And then the behavior started. Initially, it was small things. Lapses in focus during team meetings. A growing distance between Murakami and the rest of the squad. Moments of visible frustration that crossed the line from understandable emotion into something more concerning. Teammates began to notice. Coaches began to document. And the Samurai Japan management team began to have serious conversations about what to do. Nobody wanted to take action against Murakami. His status, his history, his legacy in Japanese baseball made the prospect of disciplining him deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. But as his behavior continued to deteriorate and his attitude toward teammates and coaching staff became increasingly problematic, the organization was left with no choice. Munetaka Murakami was officially suspended. The announcement of Murakami's suspension hit Japan like a thunderbolt. Sports channels ran the story continuously for hours. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from disbelief to outrage to sadness. Former teammates and coaches expressed their shock publicly. The man who had been celebrated as one of the greatest players in Japanese baseball history was now at the center of a disciplinary scandal that threatened to erase everything he had built. But inside Murakami's world, the reaction was even more intense. Those close to him described the moment he received official confirmation of his suspension as one of the most painful they had ever witnessed. The anger that had been building inside him for weeks, the frustration of poor performance, the pressure of unmet expectations, the growing disconnect between who he used to be and who he had become, collapsed suddenly into something raw and desperate. For the first time in his career, Murakami was not facing a batting slump or a tough pitcher. He was facing himself, and he did not like what he saw. In the hours that followed, Murakami reportedly became consumed by one thought above all others. He needed to speak to Shohei Ohtani, not through a phone call, not through a message or an intermediary, in person, face to face. Because in Murakami's mind, Ohtani represented everything he had failed to live up to: the professionalism, the dedication, the humility, and the relentless pursuit of excellence that had made Ohtani not just the best player in the world but the most respected human being in the sport. What Murakami did next was something that nobody in his inner circle could talk him out of. It was late in the evening when Murakami arrived at Shohei Ohtani's private residence. He had not called ahead. He had not arranged a meeting. He simply showed up, alone, visibly distressed, and carrying the full weight of everything that had gone wrong. Security personnel at the property were immediately alerted to his presence. Word quickly reached Ohtani that Murakami was outside. And then came the moment that the entire baseball world is still struggling to process. Munetaka Murakami, a man who had stood at the very summit of Japanese baseball, who had been cheered by millions, who had carried the hopes of an entire nation on his powerful shoulders, knelt down on the pavement outside Shohei Ohtani's house and began to apologize. Not standing, not sitting, kneeling, in the traditional Japanese gesture of the deepest possible remorse and respect. His head bowed, his voice reportedly trembling, apologizing not just for specific incidents but for everything, for his attitude, for his behavior, for failing to honor the standard that Ohtani and Samurai Japan represented. Witnesses who observed the scene from a distance described it as simultaneously heartbreaking and deeply uncomfortable. Here was one of the most celebrated athletes Japan had ever produced, reduced to kneeling on a public street, pleading for acknowledgement and forgiveness from a teammate he had let down. For several long, agonizing minutes, there was no response from inside the residence. And then Ohtani appeared. Those who know Shohei Ohtani well will tell you that he is one of the most patient, composed, and genuinely kind people in professional sports. He does not lose his temper easily. He does not respond to difficult situations with cruelty or aggression. His default setting, even under enormous pressure, is calm, measured, and deeply considerate. Which is exactly why what he said to Murakami that evening carried such devastating weight. Ohtani looked at Murakami kneeling on the pavement outside his home. He took in the scene before him a former teammate, a fellow representative of Japanese baseball, a man who had once been celebrated as one of the greats, reduced to this moment by his own choices and his own failures. And then Ohtani spoke. "Get out of here right now." No long speech, no detailed explanation, no careful diplomatic language designed to soften the blow. Just those words, delivered with a quiet firmness that made them land harder than any shouting ever could. Ohtani then turned and went back inside. The door closed, and Murakami was left alone on the pavement with the echo of those 6 words and the full, crushing realization of what they meant. Ohtani, the most patient man in baseball, the player who had welcomed Murakami with warmth and professionalism, the teammate who had believed in him when others had doubts, had nothing left to offer him. Not forgiveness, not understanding, not even a conversation. Just 6 words and a closed door. People who witnessed the moment said Murakami remained kneeling for almost a full minute after Ohtani went inside. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply knelt there in the growing darkness as the reality of what had just happened settled over him like a physical weight. Murakami returned home that night a different man. The people around him, family members, close friends, his personal management team, described him as eerily quiet. Not the frustrated, volatile quiet of recent weeks. Something deeper, something final. As if a decision had already been made somewhere deep inside him and all that remained was finding the words to say it out loud. 24 hours later, those words came. In a brief but devastating statement released through his representatives, Munetaka Murakami announced that he was ending his baseball career immediately. No farewell tour. No emotional press conference filled with highlights and thank yous. Just a short, stark statement that left the entire baseball world completely silent. I am ending my baseball career here. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Former teammates posted tributes filled with shock and sadness. Coaches who had worked with him throughout his career expressed disbelief. Fans who had cheered for him for years found themselves processing a loss they had never anticipated and were not remotely prepared for. In Japan, sports channels cleared their schedules to cover the announcement. Social media flooded with reactions from every corner of the baseball world. But underneath all the shock and the sadness, one question kept surfacing again and again. Was this truly about baseball? Or was it about those 6 words spoken quietly outside a residence in Los Angeles by the one person whose opinion Murakami valued above all others? Murakami's retirement, sudden, painful, and wrapped in controversy, leaves a complicated legacy. On one hand, his achievements are real and undeniable. The records he set, the home runs he hit, the moments of brilliance he produced throughout his career will always be a part of Japanese baseball history. Nothing that happened in his final days can erase what he accomplished at his best. But on the other hand, the manner of his exit will always be part of the story too. The suspension, the kneeling outside a teammate's house, the 6 words that sent him away, the decision to walk away from the sport entirely rather than face the long and difficult road back to redemption. Inside the Samurai Japan camp, the focus has already shifted back to the tournament. The team has a job to do and a championship to chase. Ohtani, as always, leads by example, arriving first, leaving last, preparing with the kind of obsessive dedication that has made him the standard by which all others are measured. The disruption caused by Murakami's situation has been acknowledged, processed, and set aside. There is too much at stake for anything else. But for anyone watching from the outside, this story will linger long after the final out of the tournament has been recorded. Because it is not really a story about baseball. It is a story about the gap between talent and character. About the difference between being great and being good. About what happens when a person loses sight of the values that hold everything together, and what it costs when the most respected voice in the room finally runs out of patience. Shohei Ohtani said 6 words. Just 6 words. And they ended a career. That is how much his opinion matters. That is how high the standard is. And that is the lesson that every player at every level, in every league around the world should carry with them from this moment forward. Thank you for watching. This is one of the most dramatic and emotional stories we have ever covered, and we want to hear your reaction in the comments below. Do you think Ohtani made the right call? Do you feel sympathy for Murakami? Let us know everything. And if you want to stay on top of every major story in the world of baseball, subscribe to our channel right now and turn on your notifications. We have more incredible stories coming very soon. Do not miss them.